The Great Leap Forward, a dream that became a nightmare. In the late 1950s, China embarked on one of the most ambitious and disastrous experiments in human history. It was called the Great Leap Forward. It was meant to catapult the nation from a poor agrarian society into a modern industrial superpower within a few years. The plan was bold, revolutionary, and deeply idealistic, yet it led to one of the deadliest famines the world has ever seen, costing an estimated 3 to 4 crore lives. Behind this catastrophe stood Mao Zedong, the charismatic and authoritarian leader of People's Republic of China, whose determination to outpace the West blinded him to the suffering of his own people. Let's understand China in the 1950s. China in the 1950s was emerging from a century of humiliation, wars, colonial exploitation, and internal chaos. Mao and the Communist Party had seized power in 1949, promising to build a new China, free, equal, and powerful. Initially, Mao's regime made some real progress. Land reforms redistributed land from landlords to peasants. Healthcare and literacy campaigns improved living conditions. 5 year plans based on the Soviet model began modernizing industry. However, by the mid 1950s, Mao grew restless. He believed that the Soviet model of slow, bureaucratic industrialization was too cautious. He wanted China to leap forward, not walk. He wanted it to leap forward into socialism and surpass England and United States in steel production and prosperity. Mao gave the vision of more, faster, better, and cheaper. He believed that China's greatest strength lay in its people, hundreds of millions of peasants who, if properly motivated, could achieve miracles. He dismissed the need for machines or experts. Enthusiasm and revolutionary spirit, in his opinion, were good enough. So, in 1958, he launched the Great Leap Forward, a movement designed to rapidly industrialize the country, especially increase the steel production. It was also intended to transform agriculture through collectivization and prove that China could achieve a communist utopia without Soviet Union's help. These were the communes. Commune was life in collective utopia. The countryside in China was reorganized into giant people's communes, each with thousands of households. Private farming was abolished. Everything, food, tools, livestock, was owned collectively. Communal kitchens served food to everyone, and villagers worked in teams under state supervision. Mao believed that collective labor would boost production and free women from household chores, making them equal contributors to the socialist economy. But soon, problems began. People stopped working diligently because there was no personal incentive. Everyone received the same, regardless of effort. Officials competed with each other to report inflated harvests to impress their superiors. The government then collected grain based on these false figures, leaving little or nothing for the villagers. This was the start of the terrible Great Famine. These were the backyard furnaces, another feature of the Great Leap Forward program. Mao wanted to turn villages into steel mills. One of the most infamous parts of the campaign was this one, making steel everywhere. Mao wanted China to outproduce England in steel within a few years. But since proper industrial infrastructure was not available, peasants and farmers were ordered to build backyard furnaces. Families melted their pots, pans, and farm tools to produce crude metal. Forests were cut down to fuel the furnaces. The steel produced was often worthless and very poor quality, useless for industrial purposes. This obsession diverted millions of workers from farming just when the crops needed tending, further worsening the food crisis because farmers got engaged in this work and were not available to grow crops, thereby reducing the food production. The another feature of Great Leap Forward was war on sparrows. Yes, you heard it right. Sparrows, the small bird that we see. And this proved to be a deadly ecological mistake. In 1958, Mao launched the Four Pests campaign, targeting rats, flies, mosquitoes, and sparrows, which he believed ate grain and reduced harvests. Across China, villagers were ordered to kill sparrows by beating drums to keep them flying until they dropped dead from exhaustion and destroying nests and smashing eggs of sparrows. Millions of sparrows were killed. But sparrows did not just eat grain, they also ate insects. With no sparrows left, locust populations exploded. These small insects, locusts, devoured crops and worse the famine even more. Realizing the mistake, Mao later replaced sparrows with bedbugs. However, the damage was already done. Then came the famine, a tragedy beyond imagination. By 1959, the countryside was collapsing. Despite failing harvests, the state continued to export grain and feed urban populations. In many villages, people survived on tree bark, grass, and clay. Reports emerged of starvation, disease, and even cannibalism. Entire families and villages vanished. Still, local officials hid the truth from Mao out of fear. Anyone who spoke up was branded counter revolutionary. Even as millions of people starved to death, newspapers printed glowing reports of record harvests. Estimates vary, but between 30 and 45 million people, which is 3 crore to 4.5 crore people, are believed to have died between 1959 and 1962, making it the deadliest famine in human history, worse than the Irish or Bengal famines. What were the political consequences of this? The first consequence was that Mao had to step back, even though briefly. By 1961, the disaster could no longer be denied. Mao reluctantly allowed Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping to take charge of recovery. They reversed many Great Leap policies. They restored private plots for farmers. They reduced the commune sizes. They encouraged realistic production reporting. Agriculture slowly began to recover. Mao, however, saw these reforms, which were pragmatic, as a betrayal of communist ideals. This resentment later fueled the Cultural Revolution of 1966 to 1976, when Mao Zedong and thousands of youth, which were influenced by him, killed people and members of Mao's own Communist Party. Why did the Great Leap Forward happen? What was the psychology behind it? It was a psychology of power and fear. The Great Leap Forward was not just an economic failure, it was a human and psychological tragedy. Mao was surrounded by yes men who feared contradicting him. Local officials lied to appear loyal and successful. The entire system discouraged truth telling. It was a case of collective delusion where ideology replaced reality and loyalty replaced logic. The Great Leap Forward began as a dream of progress to make China powerful, self reliant, and equal, but it turned into a nightmare, a perfect storm of idealism, authoritarianism, and denial. Instead of leaping forward, China was pushed years backward, losing millions of lives and trust in the system. It stands today as a stark reminder that grand visions without grounded planning and power without accountability can destroy entire nations. It should serve as an example to be learned from by all the nations and their political leaderships. Thank you so much for listening.